Morning, Netta. Good morning, Donna. You're all muted. None of you can hear me. Rivka, good morning. Suri and Gershon. Roz, Tani, Hannah, Bracha. Oh, Marian, hi. Right, okay, we're starting. I think Parsha Tazria-Metzora, I don't know if you heard me say that, is most people's least favorite Parsha. But it's very interesting when you look at the structure of the parasha and when it comes in the year. You see something that things that we don't always recognize. And it's something that we began speaking about in the last share that I gave before Pesach, when we talked about the 7 days between today, Yom HaShoah, and Yom HaAtzmaut, which is like a shiva, essentially, for the victims of the Shoah, from which we stand up, which we end with Yom HaZikaron for those who gave their lives to give us our state, Yom HaGasha Kesef, and then get up and celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut. So if we look at the Parsha, if we look at Tazria-Metzora together, then I actually put it on your sheet, so I'm going to show you the sheets. I put 3 passages from Tazria and Metzora together at the beginning of the sheet, and then it says envelope structure, women at both ends. So if we think about Parshat Tazria, begins with the Yoledet. Daber al bnei Yisrael lemor isha ki Tazria, I'm reading at the very beginning of the sheet, v'yalda zachar, a woman who becomes impregnated, v'yalda zachar, and she gives birth to a son, v'tam'a shivat yamim, she'll be impure for 7 days, kimei nidat dota titma, in the same way as she's impure for the period for the time of her menstrual period. And it's very interesting that this pasuk brings up, let's come back to stop share for a second. Interesting that this pasuk brings up nidat dota, which hasn't been mentioned anywhere in the Tanakh until now, as if we already know what it's talking about. And the nidah will only appear at the end of Metzora. So the beginning of Tazria, talking about the Yoledet, is already pushing us forward to the end of Metzora, which is going to end up having discussed the Yoledet and Tzara'at in man and cloth and buildings, and coming back to the Zav and the Zava. When you get to the Zava, the female who ends the envelope structure, like we begin with a woman, then we have all of Tzara'at, and we end with a woman. That's when we come back to the Nidah. So the Parsha creates that envelope structure just straight away in the first pasuk. And what does it mean to put a woman giving birth, and a woman with the potential for birth at the beginning and end of the Parsha, right? Because that's what Nidah and Tumat Nidah is. It's the potential for birth which isn't realized. And it needs to be processed. It's something that has to be gone through in order to be able to come into the Mikdash. So come back again to the beginning of the Parsha. After the birth, and if after 33 days, if the child born is a boy, and 66 days if the child born is a girl, ובמלאת ימי טהרה, פסוק ו', לבן או לבת, תביא כבש בן שנתו לעולה. The woman has to bring an offering to the mikdash, whereas beforehand in pasuk Dalet, all the days that she's what the Tanakh, what the Parsha calls Yemei Dmei Tahara, Bakodesh lo tiga ve'el hamikdash lo tavo ad melot Yemei Tahara. The woman can't come into a holy place, can't come into the mikdash all the way through those days, and at the end of them she brings the korban and she has to come into the mikdash. So the process of giving birth creates tum'ah, hi Esther, creates tum'ah, and that tum'ah has to be processed, and part of that process is to come back into the Kodesh. But the Parsha doesn't tell us at this stage what that process of tahara is. We only know about tum'ah, we don't know about anything about how the tahara happens. And then we go through from the Yoledet, we go to the Metzora. And the Metzora is the first case where we have a description of how you move, how the stricken individual moves from Tum'ah to Tahara. And that's if you screen share and come back to there, and that's in the beginning of Vayikra Yud Gimel, which is still in Parshat Tazria. Adam ki yeh be'or v'saro se'et o sapachat o baheret והיה באור בשרו לנגע צרה והובא אל אהרון הכהן או אל אחד מבניו הכהנים וראה הכהן את הנגע באור הבשר. I'm skipping. וראהו הכהן וטימא אותו. What do you have here? You have a process of diagnosis first of all. A person sees some kind of phenomenon in their skin and they bring it to the person who can diagnose, in this case the Kohen. And the Kohen checks and decides that this is a sign of some kind of leprosy, some kind of machala, some kind of tzara'at. And what's the first thing that happens? Pasuk Daled, v'hiskir et hanega shivat yamim. For 7 days, the stricken person has to be in isolation. So first we have diagnosis, and then we have isolation. V'ra'ahu hakohen bayom hashvi'i. On the 7th day, the Kohen checks him, and he checks, has the infection spread? Lo fasah hanega ba'or. V'hiskiro hakohen shivat yamim shenit. And then we have a second period of isolation. And then וראה אותו הכהן ביום השביעי שנית, והנה קהה הנגע ולא פצע הנגע בעור וטיהרו הכהן. And if there's no spreading, then of whatever the phenomenon is, the Kohen declares him pure. וכיבס בגדיו וטהר. And he washes his clothes and he becomes pure. Doesn't it? Stop there. Doesn't it all sound a little bit familiar? Isn't it strange? Diagnosis, isolation, and 2 positive negatives, which is what you have to have. 2 positive negative tests, which is what you have to get out today, to get out of the corona ward, if you're unlucky enough to happen to be there. So it's very strange to be reading this Parsha with everything that's going on around us, when we're in an atmosphere of tests and tests for infection, diagnosis, tests for recovery, we're all waiting. Everybody who is infected with who suffers from corona has to wait for that second negative in order to come out of their bidud. Okay, if we carry on to the continuation in Parshat Metzora already, in Perek Yud Dalet, the text begins to tell us of how do you emerge from this isolation. And again, we're going to look at the psukim. Vayikra Yud Dalet, the third source on the sheet. Zot tieh Torat HaMetzora b'yom tohorato. This is how you become pure. V'uvay laKohen. First of all, the diagnosis, you have to come to the Kohen. V'yetzeh HaKohen el michutz lamachaneh. The Kohen has to go out of this camp to the Metzora in his bidud. V'ra'ah HaKohen v'hinei nirpa nega hatzarat min hatzaroa. And the Kohen sees that he's healed. V'tzivah HaKohen v'lakach lamitaher. Shtei tziporim chayot tehorot. The Kohen has to take 2 pure birds, ve'et erez ushni tola'at ve'izov, and a cedar tree, and Rashi says that shni tola'at is wool which has been dyed red. The shni tola'at is the dye, but you have to dye something. You can't just bring red dye. So it's 2 birds and red dye, wool dyed red. Shni tola'at ve'et ha'izov, and some leaves of hyssop, some sprigs of hyssop, which is a leafy plant. So we have 2 birds from Olam HaChai, from the animal world. We have a dye whose source is an insect, and we have Izov from the plant world. וטבל אותם ואת הציפור החיה בדם הציפור השחוטה על המים החיים. Sorry, I skipped. וציווה הכהן ושחט את הציפור האחת אל כלי חרס על מים חיים. The first bird is slaughtered, is killed, and the blood is gathered in a vessel containing water. So we have a mixture of blood and water. And then the Kohen takes the living bird and he dips it together with the erez and the cedar wood and the wool and the hyssop. And he dips them into this mixture of this mixed water, a mixture of blood and water. And holding all those things, the bird and the cedar wood and the wool and the hyssop, he has to shake it over the Metzora 7 times. V'tiharo, and that makes him pure. V'shilach et hatzipor hachaya al pnei hasadeh. And then the Kohen opens up his hand. The Kohen opens up his hand and releases the one animate thing which he's holding, which is the bird, the living bird. And the living bird flies away al pnei hasadeh, which of course is symbolic of the release of the Metzora from his isolation. Having been confined to a specific area outside the camp, the Metzora suddenly becomes free as a bird. And again, in the situation of that we're experiencing now, I think we have a very clear sense of how symbolic that flight of the bird is in this ceremony, which releases the Metzora from his isolation, from his illness, from his tumah. And then in Pasuk Chet, we have one more thing which has to happen for the impurity to be replaced with purity. The chibes hametaheret begadav, the one who is becoming pure has to rinse his clothes, v'gilach et kol se'aro, and shave all his hair, v'rachatz b'mayim v'taher, and then he has to immerse himself in water and become pure. ואחר יבוא אל המחנה וישב מחוץ לאוהלו 7 ימים. And then he comes back into the camp, but he has to sit outside of his tent before he rejoins his family for another 7 days. And at the end of that second 7 days, he brings a korban. He actually comes into the mikdash before he goes into his own home. And after he's brought that korban, he can rejoin his family. And essentially, the korban of the yoledet at the beginning of the Parsha is also a similar reunification korban, that the woman is separated from her husband until, the woman is separated for those 33 or 66 days. And then after she brings the korban, she comes back. She's reunited with her family. I want to look at 2 sources which just almost associatively, the one is something which I found 2 years ago when I was teaching Uri Tzvi Greenberg, and the other I just came across this week, and I said to myself, this is something which pulls together Parsha Tazria-Metzora and Yom HaZikaron LaShoah. And the first source is from the journal of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, which he wrote as he fled from Vichy, France, on the way to America. And it's Parashat Chukat, which is a parasha which describes how somebody who's come into contact with death becomes purified with the Efer Para Aduma, from the impurity of Tumat Met, of death. And this is what he writes. Screen. I'm going to make it view 1 page. Okay. This is from the Rebbe's journal, and it was written in 1940, which is 5,700, which in Hebrew letters is Shnat Tafshin, right? 1948 was Tashach, so 1940 was Tash. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you know what? Let's stop sharing for a second. I don't know if you know this, but the Rebbe, one of his big things, and he had a lot of big things. One of his big things was explaining the names of the letters of the years. Right? So he had Chabad would get very excited about what's the year Tasham, Tafshin Men, or Tafshin Nun. One very interesting example is 1978 was Tafshin Lamed Chet, which the Rebbe read as Tishlach. And what project began to become more and more important in Chabad from about in the 1970s, but like they made a big project of it in 1978. The Shluchim, right? The idea of sending a Chabad Shaliach to the furthest, most crazy reaches of the world, from literally Timbuktu to Thailand, to Malaysia, to all kinds of crazy places where the Rebbe realized that especially young Jews were visiting. And so when he explained the significance of Tishlach of 1978, that's where he put it. How would he in 1940, assuming that he was still using the same, he was already then using the same kind of thinking, how would he explain 1940? Tash, a year when strength dissipates, right? Tash kocho means a lot of strength. And 1940 was the worst year in many ways, not in terms of the Pigiyah to Am Yisrael, not in terms of how many Jews were murdered, because the machinery of death wasn't yet functioning in 1940, but 1940 was the year that the Nazis conquered basically all of Europe. One country after another became part of the Third Reich, until it seemed as if there was nobody left to fight apart from Britain, and the United States hadn't yet entered the war. And it seemed to be a losing battle. And everybody was on the run. And the Russians, the Germans conquered France. They entered Russia. They'd conquered Poland. Was already history. And it seemed as if the world was becoming darker and darker. V'tash kocho shel haboreh, as if the strength of the Creator was weakened. And in that year, when the Rebbe, who'd been a student in the Sorbonne in Paris, fled France across the Pyrenees on the way to America, he wrote in Parshat Chukat, in his diary, the following entry. The Midrash Rabbah states, and this is from a translation of what he wrote. I think he wrote this in Yiddish, and it's a translation which appears in a fairly new book about the Rebbe, which is called Social Vision by Philip Wexler, and that I've been in the middle of reviewing it, so that's how I came across it. The Midrash Rabbah states that for all forms of contamination, of tum'ah, the purification was made explicable to Moses. So in our Parsha, when Moshe heard about Tumat Yoledet and Tumat Hazav and Tumat Metzora, he understood how purification is possible. But when he reached the passage Emor el HaKohanim, in 2 weeks' time, Parshat Emor, which speaks of the contamination of death, his face paled and he asked, with what shall it be purified? Why did Moshe have such a problem, have difficulty with this tum'ah specifically? And the Rebbe goes on to write as follows. True life is the essence and being of God. And as in the dictum of Maimonides at the beginning of Yesodei HaTorah, that his being is from himself, and all things do not exist except by the truth of his being, all that cleave to him are also truly alive. What's the Rebbe saying about life? He's saying that essentially you can put it into a cliche, right? God is life. He's saying that all of life is dependent on Borei Olam as the creator, and that in order to be truly alive, you have to feel connected to him. Okay, let's come back and see how he brings that back to purification from Tumat Met. Now, when its purpose expires, so does its life. What does death mean, says the Rebbe? Death is the end of your purpose in life. As our sages say in Masechet Shabbat, he created no single thing in this world in vain. This explains why Moses was bewildered specifically by the contamination of death. For death is a sign that its subject has no purpose at all. And how shall contamination as this be rendered pure? If we think for a second about the circumstances in which these words were written, as so many individuals felt that their lives were tiny, insignificant, swept aside by the progression of events, by war, by conquest, by oppression. And as the individuals struggle to find the way of survival, each separately, and or as families, and one of the most shocking things about the Shoah is the destruction of communities, and how from every community, one in Europe, one or two or three individuals survived from communities of hundreds, communities of thousands. How can the individual not feel lost? How can you understand what purpose could you have in life when you're faced with these enormous, sweeping catastrophes? And in a way, it's easy for us also to feel in the current situation when disease is all around us, and this virus is all around us, and we don't know from the smallest action. Yesterday I went to the post office, and you suddenly realize that you're bringing yourself into contact with you don't know who, and you don't know what the consequences will be, and it's something small, and you need to do it, and you do it, and then you ask yourself, did I need to do that? And you begin to ask questions about what your purpose is in the smallest things that you do. And sometimes it can be bewildering. It can make you lose track. It can make you, it can literally freeze you into inaction. And what's incredible about the way the Rebbe writes in the face of death and conquest, as a fugitive, taking a few minutes to write in his diary, focusing on the Parsha of the week, despite the fact that he's running for his life, is that he finds meaning in the smallest things. To repair the blight of death, the most severe contamination of all, one must descend to its place in order to raise it up, measure for measure, midah keneged midah. The resulting ascent likewise reaches to the ultimate extremity. Accordingly, and this is Wetzler now, I'm not quoting the Rebbe, just explaining, accordingly, even death can become a springboard for true life and for a greater affirmation of life than ever. The loss of divine purpose, or the loss of our conception of divine purpose, can become a springboard to cleave to God more deeply and powerfully than before. And the Rebbe says this cleaving is through the Torah and its mitzvot specifically, and as implied in the word mitzvah, meaning tzavta. Right? He's making a connection between mitzvah and tzavta, meaning togetherness. If the terrors of expulsion and decrees and death all around us create a feeling of loss in the individual. You feel literally lost. The Rebbe says, how do you pull yourself together? How do you pull yourself out of it? Tzavta. Tzavta is a bond. Tzavta is togetherness. Tzavta is taking yourself away from being lost inside yourself and reaching out to somebody else. And who is the somebody else in this context? Tzavta, says the Rebbe, is to join yourself through mitzvah to God. And we know we have different types of mitzvot. We have mitzvot ben adam lechavero, we have mitzvot ben adam lamakom. But each small act of mitzvah, he says, connects you betzavta with Borei Olam, with the Creator. And that's a very powerful message to find in the smallest things that we manage to do every day. From the Tilat Yadayim to Tfilat Boker, to preparing meals for ourselves, to saying brachas, to every little thing that we do, every small thing that we do for other people, everywhere that we can reach out, every phone call that we make to somebody. There's 2 phone calls. One phone call that I make every day to my mother, and one phone call that I've been meaning to make for the last 3 weeks to somebody who I know is new in Efrat and probably feeling lost, and I should make that phone call. And I hope that just talking about it in Shir today will give me the strength to actually do it. Every little thing is something. Tzavta is taking yourself away from being just you. And at this point, it's a very important thing. So the Rebbe's message there is a message of how to overcome the despair accompanying death and the fear of death. And that was a message that he used to sustain himself in his flight from France to America, and to recreate not just a Chassidut, but a Yahadut from the shattered refugees who found shelter there after the war. And to find meaning in that process of tahara, of moving from impurity through a process of actions, of symbolic ceremony. This idea of scattering blood mixed with water, like blood, which is a symbol of death, but also of life, and water without which there is no life, and setting free the bird to fly al pnei hasadeh, to go out to fly away over the field, which until yesterday was something we were only just thinking about doing, and now if we're within 500 meters, we can step that little bit further, and we already begin to feel like a bird who's allowed to go free. Okay, this brings me to the third source that I wanted to share with you, which brings us literally into Yom HaShoah. It's a poem by the poet Uri Tzvi Greenberg, who came to Eretz Israel in the 1920s with no idea that he'd never see his family again. And in the 1940s, he was originally he came as a secular Jew, but his family had Hasidic roots. They were an observant Hasidic family, living, I think, in Belz. And when he came, he was already well known as a poet, mostly in Yiddish. And when he came to Eretz Israel, he began writing he stopped writing in Yiddish and wrote only in Hebrew. And at first he was very popular. And then he left the Labor Zionist camp and joined the revisionists. And in Eretz Israel in the 1930s, that was basically to leave the establishment and leave everything behind. And his poems stopped being published in the newspapers, which were all run by Ben Gurion's Labor Zionists, and he went into obscurity. And then when the news began to filter through to Eretz Israel of what had happened in the camps, Uri Tzvi began writing. And he published, almost immediately afterwards, he published a book called Rechovot HaNahar, which you could translate as the breadths of the rivers, or the roads to the rivers. And the rivers could be the great rivers of Europe, or the rivers of blood of the Shoah. And suddenly because everybody had relatives that they would never see again. And suddenly people felt that he was speaking with their voice, and he was putting words to what they were feeling. And this volume of poetry became this extremely popular and a symbol of giagua, of longing for the world that was left behind and would never be again, and also of memory, and also of commemoration. And the themes of kadosh and kaddish run all the way through this book, through these poems. And I want to read one with you, which is called Kodesh Kodashim. And it combines all the themes that we've been talking about today. It combines purification through water. Water is the symbol of life. Water, which is, the birth is through water, and purification is through water of the mikveh. And both the Metzora, whose skin begins to look deathly, and the Yoledet, who has brushed with death, because in every birth there is, especially before modern medicine, there was always the chance that it wouldn't, even if it ended in life, it could also end in death. And the Yoledet's korban is as much thanks for the fact that she's survived the experience of birth as thanks for the child that she's brought into the world. So water is a symbol of both birth and purification from Tu'at Met. And in this poem, we'll find water and purification, and death, and Kodesh, and renewal. And I think that we'll finish it just in time for the siren. And if we haven't finished, then we'll come back after the siren, okay? No, that's the wrong page. 1 second. One second, I'm just looking for the right page of the poem. This is the wrong page. Where's the other page? Yeah. No. Okay. Let's hope this is the right one now. Yeah, okay. Kodesh Kodashim. It's a bit hard to read. I'm reading it from the book, but at least you've got it in front of you. ברגע האחרון, כשנתפקעו העיניים, והחלו לזלוג דם, והגוף צנח אל זרועותיי, כי הופעתי בו ברגע במקום ההרגה שם. I'm translating. At the last moment, when the eyes were opened and began to flow with blood, and the body dropped, it dropped into my arms. For I appeared at that moment in the place of execution, there. This is Uri Tzvi describing a dream in which he finds himself in the place at the very moment when his family are being slaughtered by the Nazis in Russia. And he imagines that he appears just at the moment that his mother is about to die. And as her body drops earthwards, he catches her and holds her. ואמרתי בו ברגע, ואמרתי בכל הרחמים, אמי. I said with all manner of mercy, mother. הרימה ראשה והניחתו על כתפי. She lifted her head and placed it on my shoulder. ותאמר, בני. ותשכח כי שם בלזית המזבח. And she said, my son. Who else says, bni? Abraham, on the way to the Akedah, says, bni. Vatishkach, and she forgot that there was Belzit, which was the altar. Right? Uri Tzvi is saying, is changing the scene from the scene of terrible slaughter to the scene of the Akedah. And he's holding his mother as Abraham puts his arm around Yitzchak on the way to the Akedah. And Belzit, where this wholesale execution is taking place, has become a mizbeach. Ve'amarti, henimi, hen, bnech. And again, he's echoing Abraham speaking to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak's answer, hineni bni. I answered, yes, my mother, yes, your son. And then the mother begins to speak. Yadata bni shehagoyim horgim oti? Did you know, my son, that the goyim are killing me? And Uri Tzvi replies, across the abyss of distance, Yadati imi, I knew. Odecha Elohai, b'ni chai. And his mother answers not to him, but to God. Thank you, God, my son is alive. And then Uri Tzvi goes back to the vision. Unisa'atnu ruach, v'imi v'zro'otai, v'torideni ruach, b'mavol ha'ya'am, u'leragleinu nachan. He's quoting from the vision of Yechezkel that we read last week. Unisa'atni ruach, the wind lifted me up and carried me from the banks of Nehar Kval, from the banks of the river in Babylon, to Yerushalayim. That's the vision of Yechezkel. And here the wind lifts us up, and my mother is in my arms, and the wind drops us down, b'mavola ya'a, at the entrance to a forest, u'leragleinu nachal, and at our feet is a river. And his mother asked, Hevetani li Lebanon b'ni? Have you brought me to Lebanon? La Lebanon imi. To Lebanon, my mother. Odecha Elohai b'shamayim. Thank God in heaven. Reach Lebanon be'api. Instead of the stench of slaughter, the mother says, the scent of Lebanon is in my nostrils. Shichshuch mayim ani shomaat b'ni. I hear the murmur of water, my son. Achen mayim imi. Indeed, water, my mother. Samta et hayarden leraglai? Have you brought the Jordan to my feet? Et hayarden imi. The Jordan, mother. Kacheni la yarden b'ni. Take me to the Jordan, my son. Ya'avruni meimav hamitaharim. Let its purifying waters pass over me. Ekachech la yarden imi. I'll take you to the Jordan, my mother. Tinat hamayim lirifut li b'ni. The coolness of the water is healing for me, my son. I'm skipping to the next page. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. As Uri Tzvi Greenberg imagines his mother's body touching the waters of the Yarden, she says with her last breath, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, holy, holy. Odecha Elohai. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. I praise you, my God. And Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh are the words that the angels say when they praise God every day. Biyoti, and then the mother speaks again to her son. Biyoti na'ara b'ni, when I was a young girl, my son, Berochzi be'arvei Tammuz banahar, when I bathed in the evenings of Tammuz, in the summer, in the river, Meharheret hayiti, Yarden mayim. As she bathed in the river, it's the river Bog in Russia. She imagines that she's bathing Yarden mayim, in the waters of the Jordan, the Eretz Yisrael Shalom, as if the waters of exile run into the waters of Eretz Yisrael. And by being in one water, you can be in the other. All waters, right? It's the concept of Arba Neharot Yotzot Me'eden. The idea that mayim, that water purifies, is connected to the idea that all water in the world comes from one source. The four waters which come out of Gan Eden, which divide into four in Gan Eden and travel all over the world. And in that case, all water in the world is connected together. So when you immerse in the waters, and this is one of the reasons that mikveh has to be mayim chayim, water which comes from nature, the water which evaporates and is restored to the rivers and seas of the world. All those waters are supposed to be connected. Right? That's why Aryeh Kaplan called his book about mikveh Waters of Eden. And when you immerse in any mayim chayim, any water which is natural water, you're connected to the other drops of water whose origins are from Neharot Eden, and which are all the rivers of the world. So if you're in a river in Russia, at the same time you're connected to the waters flowing in Nahar HaYarden, in the river of Eretz Israel. I should have taken you off stop share now, I'm sorry. מהרהרת הייתי ירדן מים בארץ ישראל שלנו. I would imagine that I was in the waters of the Jordan, in our Eretz Israel. Oh, אילו זכינו. Oh, if only we merited it. והנה הירדן לרגלינו. And behold, here is the Jordan at our feet. כן אמי. Yes, my mother, said Uri to me. רוח עליי וגילול גלים. There is wind on me and the rush of waves. ונגיעה and light. הלעת ערב עכשיו? Is it evening now? עת ערב אמי. כוכבים וירח עלייך. It's evening, my mother. The stars and the moon are upon you. גם עליך כוכבים וירח בני. Stars and moon are upon you too, my son. כן אמי. Yes, my mother. העלני מן המים בני. Bring me out of the waters, my son. שאני בזרועתך בני. Carry me in your arms, my son. כך, so, השכיבני על העצב בני. Lay me down on the grass, my son. טל יורד בסמוך. וחם הוא. There is dew falling beside me, and it's warm. כמו דמע בני. Like tears, my son. חם כמו דמע אמי. Warm like tears, my mother. מארג גס לבושך בני. לבוש חיילים. And then the mother turns her gaze to her son and says, your clothes are from coarse cloth, my son. It's the clothing, the uniform of soldiers. ורובה על שכמך, and there's a rifle on your shoulder. כל החי לך בני. So may you live, my son, עד שנבוא לירושלים בני, until we come to Jerusalem, my son. הנני, yes, my mother. ובואנו לירושלים בני, מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה. And when we come to Jerusalem, my son, the temple of the king, עיר מלוכה, the royal city. גם בשבת לא תחליף את זה הלבוש בני. Don't change these clothes of yours, my son, not even on Shabbat. לבוש משי תמיד רציתי לראותך פעם. Once I only wanted to see you always dressed in silks. שוב איני רוצה בכך. I don't want that anymore. כדברך אמי, as you say, my mother. ותמיד יומם ולילה עם הרובה בני. And always, day and night, with the rifle, my son. Amen, אמי. Amen, my mother. ואף בבוא הגואל, and even when the Redeemer comes, וחיטטו עמים חרבותם, and the nations beat their swords, לעתים, into plowshares, והשליחו רוביהם אל האש, and throw their rifles into the fire. אתה לא בני, אתה לא. Not you, my son, not you. לא אמי, never, my mother. הן יקומו שוב הגויים ואספו ברזל, וקמו עלינו שוב ולא נהיה נכונים, lest the nations rise up again and collect iron and rise up against us again, and we won't be ready. כאשר לא היינו מוכנים עד עכשיו, just as we weren't ready now, why? קדושים דברייך אמי, your words are holy, my mother. עכשיו תני להירדם בזרועתך בני. Now let me sleep in your arms, my son. לילה עם בני ואלוהים על הירדן. Night with my son and God on the Jordan. עמנו עמי. אלוהים על הירדן. God is with us on the Jordan, my mother. בת קול במקום אומרת, and the heavenly voice is heard saying, בקץ כל הדרכים זורם הירדן. The Jordan flows at the end of all ways. ברוך המגיע חי אל גדותיו. Blessed is he who comes alive to its banks. Yisod dimotenu bo. The secret of our tears flows in it. Umikoach hanetzach shebo. And the strength of everlasting is in it. Ad olam selah. Until and forever. Kan b'ni. Hear, my son. Ad olam imi. Forever, my mother. Sagarti einayim. I close my eyes. Laila v'libi el. It's night, and my heart is awake. I think there's 30 seconds till the siren. And I think I can't leave you anywhere better. L'mayim, Yarden, Tahara, Chaim, Refuah. All the things that we need are in this Parsha, in this poem. I think I hope we'll see many of you tonight. We're doing a Zoom for Yom HaZikaron HaShoah at 8 o'clock. The link's on your WhatsApp and in your mail. And I think I'm just going to say goodbye. We're just in time for the tefillah.
Goodbye. Toda rabah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara Jo. That was amazing. Again, that was quite a poem.
Yeah.
Stay healthy and well.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. Stay safe and reach out.
Okay.